Okay, so here is a deck profile for the OTT list that I've been using since the release of Q4 last week. A quick heads up, this is, aside from one small change which I'll talk about, this is a carbon copy of a list I found in Japan that I like more than I've seen others, but it's literally just like the most standard thing you'll find, but it works, which is kind of what you want. There's no crazy tech choices, but anyway, first is the starter, which is literally just everybody's starter. I don't have to explain that one. Same with the triggers, which is 4 IP, 4 birds, 4 mist, and 4 heals. 17 easiest things to figure out. For grade 3s, we of course play the 10 grade 3s, which are 10 deer, or 2 deer, 4 Imperial Daughter, and 4 Amaterasu. Now, I've seen a lot of lists, people have seen a lot of lists, but one question that pops up is why 10 grade 3s? There's 2 reasons. The first reason is that standard, as I've come to realize it, doesn't necessarily follow the same grade ratios as previous formats have. Like in G era, having a bunch of grade 3s can be a downside to you because you need literally every single card to combo off. But in standard, because you don't need to stride, you don't have to play as fast. The game can be played fast, but you don't need to play fast. So you can play with grade ratios a little differently. And as I've come to realize, it doesn't make that much of a difference by comparison. It's still something to get used to. At least for me it has. And the second reason is you want to generate as many protect markers as possible. Your whole point of the deck is to live longer than your opponent. Not necessarily kill your opponent faster than they kill you, just live longer than your opponent. And that could be me. That could go a few different ways. Because right now, before Destructive Roar and before anything else, this and Kagura are the only 2 decks that have grade 3s that just gain a crit. Meaning that if you are playing against a deck playing against anybody, for that matter, who doesn't have the defensive cards ready for anything with a crit and some level of buff, you will probably win just through sheer advantage alone, because they have to drop X number of cards to stop, which usually is a minimum of 3. And if they guard with, and general rule is if you make them guard with more than 2 cards, which is basically the cost of a perfect guard, you're getting the better end of that attack, even if you're not hitting. Especially if they aggressively no pass you with an extra card. That's also very good because of how often you check the top card of your deck and just leave it there. Because sometimes knowing the top card of your deck scares your opponent into guarding harder, or just letting it hit and just hoping for the best. At least with this, that's the case. With Imperial Daughter, they will basically almost always guard it, even if they have to drop 4+ cards, because they just don't want to die. Amaterasu is of course the ideal first ride because you get all of her effects the turn you ride her, whereas Daughter, you have to basically ride on top to get the crit, which is fine. And deer. A lot of times you're going to be treating this as basically another grade 2, because this should not end up on your Vanguard circle, except basically later in the game. If this is in your opening hand and you have no other grade 3s, put it back. You do not want to ride this as your first grade 3 because you don't generate anything out of it. You do get a marker, but that's it. You're not pressuring your opponent anywhere near as much. Every other deck can just out advantage you at that point. So you have to treat it as a grade 2 most of the time when it comes to early game. because a lot of times it just sits there doing nothing. So, and sometimes you can just bait your opponent to attack into it to save you from dying, which is also a very, very smart play sometimes. But yeah, and free tip on the Soul Blast ability. Don't spam it. You never need to spam it. Use it when you're trying to push for game, because you need your soul for other things, especially if like the only cards in your soul are other grade 3s, because you use cards like Leopard. Because you also need to resolve this, because even if you don't hit crits off this, you still get a power buff, and a lot of times that can help you win the game, especially if you roll this that same turn. But yeah, like this is literally the most standard grade 3 lineup. It definitely took a little bit of getting used to on my part, because the concept of playing so many grade 3s is kind of foreign, but it works. Grade 2s for Promised Daughters. Being to retirement is always good regardless. It just kind of depends on how many decks can retire in standard. Doesn't look like there's that many. It looks like it's just Blaster Blade, any Kagero card, and Deathrex if you've been following Destructive Roar. But yeah, 15k makes 23 for Force with an 8k. Basically makes all your numbers, it's just your primary beat stick. 15k as a Vanguard Circle, as a Vanguard attacker is also very good because you don't have to commit a booster to hit your opponent in any way. 3 Mimi. I want to put this up to 4, but she's kind of dead in Force matchups because you're almost never hitting anything without a booster, and sometimes you don't have a booster because you can play 13 of them. But she's really good turn 2. Because you can just keep, yeah, that's when you can really start divining or scrying, however you want to call it. And especially if you go first, this card is literally the best grade 2 because you can hit everything, and flipping one trigger almost guarantees 2 damage. But yeah, like it's just not much to it. 3 Satori Hime. Similar to Imperial Daughter Soul Blast cost, you don't want to spam this effect all that much because you want to burn your resources for the cards that actually matter more. But if you if you need the 23k booster, the 23k attacker on Force, which you'll be using a lot, it's good for that. And if you know the top card of your deck is a non-trigger, always attack with this first, and then your Vanguard, because it'll just up your chances of hitting a trigger, especially since you look at the top card before the Vanguard attacks anyway. And she doesn't have to be boosted to hit to use the ability, so she can just be 15k attacking. So you can still get a card out of your opponent. For grade 1s, and this is the change that I made to the list, which is, this was supposed to be 3 Gemini, but I just swapped out one for the 14k booster because this effect rarely comes up. Doesn't come up nearly as often as I thought it would. It's a really good card, but I don't use it often enough to want to play more. It does matter, but mostly just for soul, but I almost never run out of Counterblast to begin with. That's just maybe because like there are games where you get 2-ish heals on average, and you just let yourself take more damage, or you just don't hit your Counterblast cards early. Because if you don't hit Circle Magus as your grade 1 ride, a lot of times you just never run out of Counterblast because all your Counterblast waits until turn 3, and then this just kind of sits there. This is just kind of my own choice. I'm still not sure how good this card is because it's just a one of. I might take out another Gemini for it, but for now it's fine. It's still an 8k, even if it's not behind your Vanguard, you can still hit 23 with Promised Daughter and Satori Hime. I like it. It's fine. It's okay. Forces, if your opponent doesn't have a perfect card, it forces an extra 5k, which is really important in standard because triggers are 10k. And 2 Luckbirds. I've seen a lot of lists play 3 to 4, which is very incorrect. This card is only 5k, and you'll never resolve you'll never resolve multiple of these a game. So you need to not play more than 2 because you need this 8k is very relevant because your gift doesn't generate any offensive power. You don't get 10k for free. Like, you don't, and you need to hit 23s consistently because forcing 15k shield out against Royal Paladin and Kagero allows you to get more just general better numbers. Simple as that. On turn 2, this card is great because it's 11k and lets you just hit anything. And even on grade 3, you can use this to poke at rear guards. It makes 20k from its daughter after it's used, which is the column you ideally want. This is also forces out a 10k against 13k force bases, and it makes 26 with Imperial Daughter's ability, so you still hit a 15k if you have to. But outside of that, I never want to see multiples of these at once. It very much clogs. My opinion, Farfel Magus here is the best grade one, because much like Mimi, you kind of want to resolve the effect as soon and as often as possible, especially if you're not hitting triggers in the top of your deck as a result. Like, if the top 3 cards of your deck are all grade 1s, and you just keep checking the top card, putting them all to the bottom, it tells your opponent that you're much closer to your triggers, and they have to prepare for it, or they're not in for a good time, especially early game. Because taking an early damage lead before grade 3 ride is basically guaranteeing game for Oracle Think Tank, because, like I said, the whole point of the deck is to live longer than your opponent, and if they're at higher damage than you for basically the whole game, you're going to win just because they have to guard harder, and then they'll die faster. Because in Standard, unlike G, in G you can just take a whole bunch of damage early, and if your deck can make up the damage difference, which a lot of decks could, then you were fine. But in Standard, if you take a lot of damage early, not a lot of decks can make that up, because only one deck at the moment just attacks more than 3 times, and even then, that deck really has a hard time with dealing with a huge difference in damage. Like, if you're at grade 3 and they're at 3 damage, you're at 1, you're definitely doing something right, and you're definitely winning that game, and you should be winning that game. And then for Turtle Magus, I'm conflicted on this card because it's good, but it's not that good. If it's your grade 1 ride, that's the best case scenario for you, but for some weird reason, this and Luckbird are the only 2 cards that let you plus before grade 3, whereas Kagero and Royal Paladins have multiple cards at various grades that let you plus before grade 3. So not hitting this as your grade 1 ride makes a huge difference, because you're mostly just sitting there waiting until you hit Amaterasu or Daughter. And her other ability to put a grade 2 to the bottom it's very good, but again, having multiples out is kind of bad, similar to Farfel Magus early game if you hit a trigger. But you still have to play it at 4, at least for the time being, because again, you need every avenue to plus, because this Luckbird, none of your grade 2s actually plus you anything, which is kind of, I feel, Bushiroad's attempt at overbalancing, just like they did with Tom, but it's still fine because the deck is still fine on its own. But this card is kind of meh. Like, this could have been like a triple rare and it probably would have had the same effect, and it wouldn't change anything, but that's how it is. So that is the deck. It's, like I said, it's very, very straightforward, very standard. There's no crazy tech choices, because there really isn't any crazy tech choices to put in. This card is a lot more fantastic on paper than people thought it was, which is kind of saying something, because people almost immediately thought it would be the best card in the set after the set was released, and it kind of is. And of course, CEO is probably the best card to see in multiples, because she can get very big very, very fast. And there's kind of a jerk. Lets you just kind of steal games. It's also pretty bad against other Oracle Think Tank decks, because they always have the cards to block it. But it is what it is. Thanks for watching.